MindCep Podcast. It's your host, Alex Muir, helping you flex your mind, body, and soul. In today's episode 73, we're going to be speaking with Dr. Dawson Church. Dr. Dawson Church is a PhD, an award-winning science writer with 3 best-selling books to his credit. The Genie in Your Genes was the first book to demonstrate that emotions drive gene expression. Mind to Matter showed that the brain creates much of what we think of as an objective reality. Bliss Brain demonstrates that peak mental states rapidly remodel the brain for happiness. Dr. Church did his undergraduate and graduate work at Baylor University and obtained his doctorate at Holos University under the supervision of Harvard-trained neurosurgeon Norm Shealy, MD, PhD, and founder of the American Holistic Medical Association. Dr. Church has conducted dozens of clinical trials and founded the National Institute for Integrative Healthcare to study and implement promising evidence-based psychological and medical techniques. Its largest program, the Veteran Stress Project, has offered free treatment to over 20,000 veterans with PTSD over the past decade. His groundbreaking research has been published in many prestigious scientific journals. Dawson Church is the editor of Energy Psychology, Theory, Research, and Treatment, a peer-reviewed professional journal. He shares how to apply these breakthroughs to health and athletic performance through EFTuniverse.com, one of the most visited alternative healing sites on the web. And please welcome Dr. Dawson Church to the podcast. And this episode is brought to you by RadioGuestList.com, the #1 free radio guest, podcast, and talk show guest expert interview booking service on the internet. This episode is brought to you by PodcastGuest.com, connecting podcasters with great guests. Podcasters. Find relevant experts and other podcasters to be guests on your podcast. Experts, guests, and more. Get booked on great podcasts to expand your reach and audience. PodcastGuest.com connects podcasters with experts, authors, and other podcasters to be guests on their podcasts. Disclaimer. All information provided by Alex Muir is of general nature and is spoken from Alex Muir's and his guests' personal experiences and personal opinions on the topics related to fitness, health, and education only. No information is to be taken as medical or other health advice pertaining to any specific health or medical condition. You agree that use of this information is at your own risk and hold Alex Muir harmless from any and all losses, liabilities, injuries, or damages resulting from any and all claims. MindCep mission. The MindCep's mission is to empower 30+ million listeners worldwide to achieve optimal mental and physical health through engaging podcasts, inspiring positive change for future generations. Welcome back to the MindCep Podcast, part 2. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on the first time. And one of the areas that I really wanted to, talk about again with Dr. Dawson is specifically how, what kind of changes have developed since we last spoke about EFT? Because I've been noticing it popping up a lot more online in articles and books and podcasts, just another modality for people to, develop their own personal mindfulness practice. Now, can you speak to a little bit about, how, things have changed with the EFT emotional freedom technique or the Ecomeditation, or maybe some improvements that have been made to the practicalities of it?
I think it's spreading because it works, and there's no big pharmaceutical company behind it. There's no big advertising campaign behind it. It's just word of mouth, and people try it and it works. And I think the main reason it spreads is because it works quickly. And when you tap, you feel different in your body. So as people use EFT tapping, they put they stimulate those acupressure points while thinking about bad stuff in their lives, and physically they feel better right away. I was working with somebody this morning, and they had a strong emotional response to an event in their lives. It had a difficult event in their lives. They were really highly triggered. And as they tapped, all of their emotional intensity just melted away. And it was great to see that happening so fast. And so I think that it's accessible. In only a couple of minutes, you can feel that change in your body. We also know now from over 200 clinical trials that big changes are happening in your neural network. And so all of those stress connections, all of those parts of the brain that are active during stress, the emotional brain, those parts of the brain just calm down. And that physical feeling of well-being that you feel at relief is accompanied by a neurological change as that emotional brain calms down. And I think that is now being experienced by so many people that they're sharing it with their friends, doing it with their kids, they're doing it in schools. It's working its way into many different parts of people's experience. And the big change that's happening is just organic spread of EFTs. That's what's really, I think, the big phenomenon we're seeing now.
Yeah, because I feel like people, ever since the pandemic hit and, when we last spoke, I feel like people are, I feel like the year 2023 is the year of self-care, the year of, taking care of our minds, taking care of our bodies. And people are a lot more aware of maybe emotional triggers that have, maybe caused them or emotional triggers and from previous traumas, or just from, previous things that they've gone through that might have impacted their morale. And now that they've slowly started to develop, the EFT technique, doing some sort of daily meditation, and then in conjunction with breath work, I feel like it's doing wonders for people's psyche and, like you said, making them physically feel the effects of that.
Well, your vision of 2023 being the year of self-care, I completely endorse that. An old Jewish friend of mine in New York used to say, "From your lips to God's ear."
Yeah.
Yeah, and so many people see self-care at the bottom of the priority list, Alex. And so, for example, say we blocked out maybe 24 hours of me time. We plan to go to the gym, plan to go to the beach, plan to read a book, just give ourselves some downtime. And then a friend calls up and says, "Will you help me move?" Or, "I need to talk to you about some problem in my life." Or some family member has a crisis. Very often that's the first thing to go. We sacrifice our own self-care at the at the whim of people around us. And it's not as though we're going to be insensitive or have rigid boundaries and not help other people who are in need, but how about helping ourselves first? And I've seen people, like, just for example, I schedule my personal breaks 18 months out. So right now, I can tell you a year, I can go to my Google Calendar and I can tell you what I'm doing in the middle of next year for self-care. So I can't tell you what podcast I'll be on in a year and a half. I can't tell you what conference I'll be speaking at, but I can tell you when I'll be in the woods and walking in the woods and meditating, tapping, reading, writing, nurturing myself. Because that is priority number one. Does that mean I never break those appointments with myself? No, I if I have a really busy work schedule, if there's an emergency, I'm available to do it. But that is such an eloquent declaration of the need for self-care. And people often put themselves last. So I'm going to encourage everyone who's tuning in today to make that self-care a priority. Don't just write in that week-long vacation or that 3-day weekend, or maybe it's a 3-day weekend officially, and you're going to make it a 5-day weekend for you. But write down what you'll be doing. What will you be creating for your life that weekend? Make it visual, make it detailed, make it compelling, and then that will give you a vision to move toward. And again, life may throw you a curveball. It may not happen that way, but by putting the time in your calendar and then describing it in detail, you're declaring to life, this is my priority, and that self-care is something worth doing, and that I am as a person am worth taking care of. So that's really powerful declaration. I recommend we all make that part of our assumption set going forward.
No, absolutely. And the fact that you have your personal break scheduled 18 months out, that is absolutely crazy. That is awesome. Wow. Because one thing I've done for myself is I like to schedule in my daily meditation. I always like to do it like first thing in the morning. Like when I saw you on previous interviews, you would always advocate to your patients, your clients, and then other podcast listeners that, hey, you have the best opportunity to set up your day when you do your echo meditation, your EFT tapping in the morning. And I remember you saying like, you want to work your way up, and most people, your patients started like at 8 to 10 minute sessions, and then they slowly worked up from there, depending on their previous life trauma, depending on the emotions that they're working through. And I can confidently say now, Dr. Dawson, that since we last spoke, I'm now at the point where I'm either doing 2 sessions a day of half an hour unguided meditation. Some days I might be distracted and I'll do a guided meditation, like 2 guided or 1 guided, 1 unguided. And I'm basically at the point where it's like consistently half an hour a day, which is taking me a few years, but getting there. But I just want everyone to know, and the listeners to know, that you can start with 5 minutes a day or 10 minutes a day, and then you can slowly work your way up, because you are training your mind to become more present, and then your body starts to follow suit. Is that right?
Yes. And repetition is so important. I'm doing new research now on the brain networks that we activate when we meditate effectively. And again, there's really effective meditation. In my book, Bliss Brain, I talk about what science shows us are those meditation methods that really produce both neurological change and genetic change that trigger the expression of various genes. And so you want to do a meditation that's effective, but then repetition is incredibly important. Like, we all know that if you want to build your pectorals and deltoids and biceps, you go to the gym and make it a regular thing. You do it regularly. Just going occasionally isn't going to make much of a difference to your body. What people don't understand, in fact, what most neuroscientists hardly understand, is how rapidly the process happens of remodeling your brain tissue. And I have an amazing image in Bliss Brain of 2 neurons firing in real time. And this is an image captured from a scanning electron microscope that has such high resolution, it can literally see a single neuron in your brain. So at the beginning of the scanning electron microscope image, you see these 2 neurons, and they're shaking a little bit as they are firing together. And then they start moving together very, very slowly, it looks like, and then eventually they touch and intertwine, and now those neurons that were firing have wired together. And then you read the caption, so you see it there, and it all looks pretty logical, that neurons that fire together wire together. Then you look at the time stamp on those images. The whole process took 12 seconds. In only 12 seconds, neurons that were firing together have wired together. So if you are repeating positive thinking, if you're repeating affirmations, if you're repeating EFT, if you're repeating stress reduction, if you're repeating nurturing, if you're repeating any positive activity, and you maintain it for minute after minute after minute, hour after hour, regularly, day by day, you're building neural capacity quickly, and your brain actually remodels itself, or parts of it do, much faster than your muscles grow. So you're working out your brain is changing quickly, and within a few weeks, Alex, your brain anatomically looks different. In a year or two of doing that consistently, it looks very different. So consistency is the key.
Yeah, it's like you turn into I feel like a completely different person. Like how I handle stress, how I come across, how I show up, to people that I'm around. I feel like a completely different person by maintaining this, like, I'm flexible with the practice, but I'm rigid with the consistency, like you said, and just making sure I do it every single day. That repetition, it's like my body is now at the point where I feel off if I don't have that daily meditation.
Yeah.
And you feel so good, and you feel like you're able to be present with people in a whole nother level.
Yeah, you've changed your biochemistry, and that presence isn't just a figurative term. You literally are in the present moment. And what happens is that when we look at brain scans of people doing this, is that certain regions deactivate and other regions activate. And which regions are more and less active is incredibly interesting. So I did a randomized controlled trial, which was just published in one of the top neuroscience journals in the world. And we had people doing Ecomeditation, which is a very simple evidence-based meditation. It just stacks mindfulness on top of tapping, on top of heart math, on top of self-hypnosis, just 4 or 5 really quick evidence-based routines. And in 5 minutes, they get you into this deep state. So we had people doing it for 22 minutes a day. And we had a control group doing mindful breathing, also 22 minutes a day. And we had them in high-resolution scanners before and after 1 month of practice. And after a month, it was astonishing to see what happened. Their brains had changed the way they functioned and the way they were anatomically. They're part of the brain that handles self-concept, that builds your sense of who you are, that often is focused very much on past problems you've had in your life and future problems you may have in your life. I call it in my book, Bliss Brain, I call that the me show. The part of the brain that handles the me show is called the mid-prefrontal cortex. That part of the brain was just quiet in those people who'd done this for a month. And the part of the brain that handles positive emotions, compassion, joy, gratitude, awe, happiness, serenity, altruism, all those emotions, that part of the brain was lit up. And so that default mode network, which is right like between your eyebrows, right between your eyes in the center of your forehead, that default mode network, that mid-prefrontal cortex that builds your sense of self, that was quiet. And when that happens, when that part of the brain goes dormant, your focus shifts from future and past to the present. So you literally are more present with those around you when you're doing this. And they can tell, like when they look into your eyes, when they notice your breathing, when you're having a conversation, you look present because you are present, and it's literally a shift in your brain function. So you saying that you've come more into the present moment, you're more present with people, is literally a function of a different brain.
No, absolutely. And with the clinical trials that you've gone through and patients that you've had, are any of those patients athletes? And if so, how has EFT helped athletes enhance their focus and their personal athletic performance?
It's really cool to see how it helps athletes. Like I did a series of interviews with members of the Tennessee Titans football team.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and they were really into EFT, the ones I talked to. And one, for example, had several injuries the year before, the season before, and he'd broken several fingers of his catching hand. And each time he did that was really bad. He was out several games, and he held up his hand and he said, "Dawson, this is my $1 million hand." You don't want to break a finger on that hand. And so he said, and this season I've been tapping in advance of every game. I've been visualizing myself not getting injured, and I'm just on my game every game. I'm far more at peak. I haven't had any injuries. So he was finding that it had really sharpened his game. People report usually that their focus is better. Their sleep quality often improves because they aren't bothered by all of those traumatic events. And if they are, they just tap and work with a professional, and they can rapidly release them. So yeah, it's making its way into professional sports, Major League Baseball, professional football. At the Olympics, it's really big. And then in soccer, football, it's coming along like the Italian. There's a Four Nations Cup in Europe every year, and Italy just loses every time. I mean, they've just had a losing streak that's lasted for decades. And finally, they learned to tap. Like a couple of years ago, they all ran out of the dugout. They were all tapping. And then this year they won.
Right on. Yeah.
Just less stress.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like when the body and the mind are more congruent, there was another book that I'm not quite done yet, but it's very similar to your teachings. Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Yeah, love Joe.
Yeah. And then what was it? Becoming Supernatural. Yeah. That completely shifted my perspective on how our minds produce energy, how the body produces energy. And when we're doing meditation and mindfulness practice, right, over a long period of time, not a super long period of time, but like you said, even a month or a few weeks, just those consistent repetitive, a little bit longer sessions, like 30 minutes to an hour, you really, really feel like a different person. And they, like his book, like it just really just showed me a different perspective, like your teachings on how to, go just a little deeper into your practice to really feel the effects.
Yeah, I've been at many of his workshops. I presented at his conferences, and I've also published several clinical trials of people at his workshops. And we've shown that there are many internal changes when you do that kind of practice. Joe also is a real pioneer in collecting EEG brain scans from people doing these guided meditations, and they are phenomenally effective. Now, you mentioned earlier too something really interesting, Alex, that you sometimes use a guided meditation, other times you don't. And guided meditations are training wheels. They are there for you on days you're distracted. They're super useful for people who are starting meditation because they give your mind and your attention something to focus on. So for the first 2, 3, 4, 5 years, using guided meditations, the guidance really gives you that focus of attention. After that, you are going to find yourself naturally gravitating toward unguided meditations because now you don't need someone's voice to get you there. You're able to get there by yourself. One friend of mine said that when he began using Ecomeditation, the simple method that I teach and offer, his first Ecomeditation sessions, he said, I've been like wandering around trying to get to the state. Suddenly I was there. He said before in meditation, it was like driving through a dark city where all the street lights are out and you can't see the signs, trying to find your destination. He said, when I listened to those guided tracks, I was able, it was like turning on the lights. I could see my way. I got there right away. I found the way to my destination. But after you've done that a few times, a few dozen times, for a few days, a few weeks, a few months, you know the destination, you know what you're aiming for, you know what your body feels like, and you know the cocktail of neurochemicals in your brain. You know how much serotonin it's going to release and how much dopamine you're going to have in your brain, how much anandamide, oxytocin. So all of these chemicals are in your brain, and that formula is one you can replicate. So you then sit down after a few years with no guidance, and you can get there immediately. You can stay there for as long as you want. You then leave with the afterglow of all those pleasure chemicals still in your brain. Dopamine, which is also the same neurochemical neurotransmitter active in addiction. Heroin, cocaine, alcohol, smoking, a lot of reward-based addictive substances are recruiting the dopamine system. But a meditator using an effective guided meditation has a 65% rise in dopamine. And so now you're getting the same effect as a slug of heroin with none of the side effects purely from your own body, your own brain.
Now, another thing I want to mention, I don't know, because I feel like it could relate to echo meditation, is like cold exposure or cold showers or like cold plunges. Combining that regularly, like I was listening to Andrew Huberman's podcast, and he says like, people that do cold showers or cold plunges, whether that be in a lake or river, the ocean, or they just have like a colder shower, they'll like for like 5 minutes, doing that like every day, similar to the meditation in conjunction with meditation. It just helps you release those feel-good chemicals because you're doing something, kind of challenging for the body with cold shower, and then you're doing something a little challenging for the brain. So like with those two things together, does it give like a bit of more of a boost to serotonin and dopamine as well?
You can play around with different kinds of physical exercises like that. So cold exposure is one. Another that can quickly change your mood is simply plunging your face into a bowl of ice water. So whenever you feel as though you need a bit of a mood boost, that can just do that for a few moments, and you'll usually feel the mood change. So even though we're using things like meditation, we're using EFT tapping, we're using other kinds of stress reduction techniques, mental techniques, emotional techniques, you still need things that are going to support your physical body independently. And so you still are going to be really paying attention to your diet and clean food, high quality food. Supplements. I take a bunch of supplements every day. I can just feel they help my body be in tune. So you don't want to support your body with all the other practices that make it feel good, including, dare I say it, conventional medicine. You need to have a great doctor.
Yeah.
So if you have something medically wrong with you, you get a good diagnosis and get appropriate treatment. So all of these things together are part of a healthy lifestyle, and individually they can make you feel good. Collectively, if you're eating great, if you're exercising, if you're doing whatever kinds of biohacks like those cold plunges that make you feel good, and you have inner peace, you have serenity, you have all of those pro-social emotions we found in that Ecomeditation study, then you are working the equation from both ends. Exogenous factors like those external inputs, nutrition, food, cold plunges, and so on. Endogenous ones, inner ones like attitude, mindset, tapping, meditation, and then you have the best of all possible worlds.
No, absolutely. And another thing I want to mention, like how can people balance the demands of their daily life with the need to take care of their mental and their physical health? I know we've touched on a lot of it, but what would you say to that?
Prioritize yourself and make that meditation time a priority. I just finished a study which is being published in a peer-reviewed journal soon, and we decided to look at something we hadn't examined before. We introduced a new questionnaire measuring business productivity. And we said to ourselves, okay, we know these people are getting super happy. Their gamma brain waves, which are a measure of happiness, are going way, way, way up. They're reporting that they're much more happy on questionnaires. We know that they're reporting self-transcendent experiences, hooking into their higher selves, higher consciousness, higher powers. We're having all these wonderful experiences. And so if you have these great self-transcendent experiences, it's great for you. It's wonderful. It's a pleasurable experience. It releases all these neurochemicals in your brain. But what good is it doing if you're an entrepreneur for your bottom line? What good is it doing for your family? What good is it doing for those around you? What good is it doing for society? Because the old model, people who were into all of these practices, was you went away from society. You took vows, went into a convent, went to the monastery, went to the Himalayas, lived in a cave. So there was all this focus on moving out of the world. And the modern mystic, of course, is in the world. So we measured productivity in our most recent clinical trial. And what we found, Alex, was just amazing. After 30 days of using Ecomeditation, only a month of doing this very, very brief 20-minute-a-day practice, their productivity had risen 20%.
Holy
that
moly.
means they're now getting done in 4 days what used to take them 5. They're getting an extra day in their week from doing this in 30 days, only a month of doing it. So you're not only just feeling better and becoming a much more efficient human being, your brain is tuned, it's running in this beautifully efficient way, and you're enormously more productive than you were before. So we found that was a big effect from 30 days. 6 months down the line, their productivity had risen even further. So when you say, I'm busy, I don't have time for this, really, you don't have time not to be 20% more productive.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Those numbers are mind-boggling. Holy moly. What else? Another thing I want to mention is what are some current projects that you're working on right now that you're super excited about that you might be working on as of right now, or some projects that are coming up in the near future that you're super passionate about?
A number of things are really a key focus of mine right now. I'm thinking about the next generation of neuroscience research. And I mentioned how quickly the brain is remodeling itself, how quickly we make those connections. And so in my book, Bliss Brain, I talk about something that Richard Davidson at the University of Madison, Wisconsin he has a huge lab, over 100 people in his lab, one of the best known and longest running, 30-year research projects into mindfulness and meditation. And he identified 4 circuits in the brain that are critical to well-being. And then Andrew Newberg, who wrote the book, How Enlightenment Changes Your Brain, he referred to that as the Enlightenment Network. So we now can identify this network in the brain, and it has 4 circuits in it. And these circuits are highly active in expert meditators. And I'm talking Tibetan monks who've had 40,000 lifetime hours of meditation. And so the 4 networks that are active in the four circuits active in these meditators are, one of these has to do with the control of emotions. They feel emotions. They feel all the same sorrow, regret, all of the negative emotions, all the upset anyone feels, but they very, very quickly shift to positive emotions. They can regulate their emotions. So there's a circuit that does that, and brain science has mapped that. The second circuit is attention. And we know, again, from these studies of expert meditators, that they have hyper focus. They can sit there for 4 hours and focus. Westerners, we can't do that usually, but we get to focus better and better as we do this more. So they regulate emotions, they focus. The third thing they do is turn on a network called the self-attention regulation network. And that's the part of the brain that is deeply into suffering. When we're focused on ourselves, we suffer. When we're focused on others, we tend to suffer less. And they just dial that part of the brain activity down when they meditate. And the final circuit that they are turning on is the compassion circuit. They're super hyper compassionate, and they also feel a lot of in the same circuit that also handles gratitude, awe, and happiness. So there are these four circuits, and I have a whole chapter on these in my book, Bliss Brain. But in my neuro research, I don't want to just map the four circuits of the Enlightenment Network. I want to teach people how to trigger neural plasticity and growth in each of those four circuits. So I'm working on a new set of exercises called neuroliminals, and I'm writing about them in a new book. And I'm going to be actually starting to talk about this more, and then in the next couple of years, really get the word out there in a big way about these exercises, because they're just like brain training for distinct parts of the brain. Just the way you isolate certain groups of muscles and train them at the gym, you're isolating these groups of neurons and training them extensively in your brain and making that enlightenment circuit light up. So I really believe that most people, Alex, are living. If one thing frustrates me and makes me seriously annoyed, now, I'm not an annoyed guy. I'm a really happy, mellow human being. But one thing that just really, it hurts my heart is seeing the limitation people have in their lives. They tell me their stories. I see them at live workshops, or I do a virtual workshop, and they pour out their hearts, and they tell me about all the challenges and limitations in their lives. And they're real to them, but they're imaginary. They're not threats to their survival. And yet by ruminating on them, their brain thinks they are threats to their survival. So their bodies produce lots of cortisol. They have all these stress chemicals. They crash their immune systems. They accelerate aging. All of these things happen just by our thinking. And so I am so committed to getting these techniques out there, because when we learn to shift our limitations, when we say to ourselves, I don't believe that thought anymore. I'm not that limited human being. I hear myself saying the same thing my father and mother said, and it's just not true. It's just a limiting belief. I can let go of that. So when people drop these, we human beings, Alex, have dramatically more potential than we believe. I'm not talking about double the potential. I'm talking about multiples the potential we think we have, and we just have to drop our limited thinking. So that's really my frustration. People just parrot these same things that their parents thought and believed, which aren't true, and then giving us the tools to release that limited thinking, and then claiming our power. It's just amazing to watch somebody, say, doing art or playing music or running and jumping and being physical, enjoying their physical body, all the things we can do when we drop our limited thinking. Our limited thinking is, Milton Erickson said, the mind is your biggest obstacle to happiness. The Buddha said the same thing. It's mental activity that keeps us stuck in suffering. And so letting go of all of that, it is possible, it is necessary, and then you claim that life full of love and joy and beauty and grace. Like, I wake up in the morning and meditate myself, Alex, and afterwards I am just so full of passion and intensity and emotional feeling, love, joy, grace. I don't know what to do with myself. It's so strong. And so you're having these floods of these pleasure neurochemicals in your brain, and then you're moving into the world to do positive things around you as well. So that is our potential. And I just long to see everyone in the world learn to release things that limit them and then move into the flow of what they can be, because we have a destiny as human beings that's far greater than the limited thinking that most of us are content with.
Yeah, and I like how you said basically, our destiny is to find flow. And one thing I wanted to add to that, Dr. Dawson, was, as I've been deepening my personal meditation practice over the last few years, I've noticed over time, because I've just been getting more and more comfortable with it, and I'm really attracted to that, like how I feel, right, from all the repetitive sessions, is that the fact that I'm noticing more flow, I'm feeling more flow, and ideas are coming to me more. I'm like in conversations, maybe I'm meeting someone new, I'm able to make that connection better. They just see that I'm coming from a place of compassion rather than a place of desperation, right? Which a lot of us sometimes come from, right? If let's say we're in business, or we're trying to hit sales targets and stuff like that, and we're not always coming from a place of gratitude and compassion, right? But it's help. It's almost like my ability has shifted for how I can handle, right, different emotions, right? The emotional regulation has gotten better and better over time, which has also been shifting, like you said, those pleasure chemicals, and my body's transitioning from a flight or a fear or flight state to a flow state a lot more regularly.
Yeah, the cool thing is we all have that enlightenment network in our brain with those 4 circuits that can be active. Most of us just aren't using it because we're suppressing its activity through fear. When you release the fear, then suddenly you light up those 4 circuits and you start to have a much better life, and you literally have the hardware for ecstasy in your brain. So every human being has that hardware. It's just like something we possess already inherent in our bodies. We just haven't turned it on yet. So you start to turn it on regularly. You get into that flow state on a daily basis, and everything around you starts to shift. I am so glad, Alex, you're having that experience.
It's absolutely incredible. And the reason I love the Ecomeditation and the EFT technique is the fact that you're doing like the acupressure, right?
Yes.
The acupoints plus the developing the mindfulness at the same time, right? Because sometimes the body needs both, right? And the breath work too. So it's almost you're getting like a trifecta pleasure chemicals that you're creating yourself just by following this practice. So I wanted to say I love your work. Super passionate about your books as well. They're absolutely wealths of knowledge, and I recommend them to everyone that listens to my podcast. Well, you guys got to listen to these books. Like, it will revolutionize the way you think and make you find that flow state much, much faster, right? And in a very enlightening way, right? Step-by-step process, right? That's all it is. It's just a little bit each day, which compounds, and then you're going to want to do more because you feel good, right? And when you feel good, it puts you in that heightened state.
That's right. And that feeling good is your guide to well-being. So we don't need to hook you up to a brain monitor or test your hormones and neurotransmitters. Just that physical sensation of well-being, that means that all of those circuits are firing, all of those hormones and neurotransmitters are being produced, all of those genes are being upregulated. And just that physical sense of well-being is your guide to your own journey and your own movement along that path. So just tune into your body. That's called interoception. Tune into your body. When you feel good, you're on the right track.
No, absolutely, Dr. Dawson. And it's been a pleasure having you on for part 2. Our second podcast together is basically 2.5 years it's been. So absolute pleasure to have you on the MindCep Podcast again. Love the work that you're doing. And where are you most active right now on your social media, or maybe some past interviews that you've had? Where can our listeners, reach out to you, find you, and how can they, maybe even start an EFT echo meditation course of yours?
Well, the easiest thing to do is to go to my website, Dawson, my name, just DAWSON, gift, GIFT, gift.com. And there you'll find the EFT mini manual, which will give you the instructions for EFT acupressure tapping. Just download the manual, give it a try, and you'll feel the effect in your body right away. There's also a special Ecomeditation track at dawsongift.com focused on immunity, because we found in 2 clinical trials that when you do Ecomeditation regularly, your immunity soars, your cortisol goes down, and your immune markers go way up. So at dawsongift.com, you can download that free Ecomeditation track. Then through that link, you'll find our certified practitioners. You can work one-on-one with people. We have lots of online courses for things like weight loss and relationships and anxiety. I think we've now had over 10,000 people do our insomnia course. And just read the reviews. People say, I did the first 30 minutes of the insomnia course. Immediately, my sleep changed. It is so easy to shift your insomnia. You can get all evidence-based, science-based stuff. So we have all those courses available through dawsongift.com as well. And then also we have an app called Stress Solution. And through Stress Solution, you can do live on-demand, one-on-one sessions with a certified trained practitioner. And this is so cool because the moment you're feeling off balance, the moment you're stressed, you literally pull up the Stress Solution app. You can click on the name of a practitioner. It says, there's a little green light that says, available for session. And you literally hit the button and boom, you are in a session with a practitioner now. And the research shows that anxiety drops by over 40% in the first little while you're doing that. So this is another remarkable way of doing it really quickly. So dawsongift.com, that's an easy way to get access to this whole ecosystem. And then the Stress Solution app is also great for work with a live person, one-on-one video conferencing whenever you're feeling off your game.
Holy smokes. Absolutely amazing. Love it. Well, pleasure having you on the MindCep Podcast today, Dr. Dawson, and I'll send you the audio for my interview there. I'll probably get this posted for this Friday, and then I'll send you the audio for that. And
we'll share it too, Alex. Thank you.
Awesome. Right on. Have a great rest of your evening there, and we'll chat soon.
Every blessing. Thank you. Bye.
All right. Take care. Dear listeners, I thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to the MindCep Podcast. This is your host, Alex Muir, helping you flex your mind, body, and soul. And I just want to start off by saying, I appreciate you. I appreciate you listening to this podcast. I appreciate your feedback on my episodes and following the show. And I would like your feedback as well in the form of a short rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Spotify Podcast now has a rating and review section. So I would love your feedback on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, to help me attract great guests and to help me further the show and develop the show and improve the show. So hopefully you guys all enjoyed this episode. And again, you can reach out to me to give additional feedback on my blog. That's alexandermuir.com/blog. You can reach out to me on through my Instagram, through Facebook. All my links are in the show notes. And again, I appreciate you and thank you all for listening. I hope you all enjoyed that special guest series episode brought to you by podcastguest.com and radioguest.com. If you'd like to reach out to me, get to know me, or my guests, you can do so at my blog. That's alexandermuir.com. That's ALEX, Amazon Mike, UIR.com. And then you go under my blog section, and it has all my recent podcast episodes and prior episodes with my guests. And if you'd like to reach out to me on another platform, I'm also on Instagram, Facebook. You can DM me on Facebook or on Instagram. And you can leave a short review if you enjoy the episodes. Leave 5 stars, rate, review, and comment on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And I appreciate you all. Thank you all for listening, and see y'all next time.